Welcome back to Reading Every X-Men Comic Ever, the series where I read, recap, and rank every X-Men comic ever. Like I mentioned at the very end of last week, this week it's all about what was happening in between the Secret Wars 2 tie-in issues. That means Uncanny X-Men 197 through 201, New Mutants 31 through 35, New Mutants Special Edition, X-Men Annual 9, and Dazzler 41 and 42. All these issues were really good, which I'm not super surprised by considering both Uncanny and New Mutants have been pretty consistently good for a while, but it is a welcome change of pace after last week. That said, let's start by continuing with Uncanny X-Men by Claremont and Romita Jr. And as always, full spoilers for these comics, so save this video and come back later if you are so inclined. Uncanny X-Men 197 has Kitty and Colossus kidnapped by the bastard man known as Arcade and used as pawns during his annual birthday fight with his assistant. And let me tell you, I was really hoping the assistant was going to win this time. This unwilling escapade does end up rekindling the friendship of the two heroes, and I just hope that's kind of where the rekindling ends. We don't really need a run back on that romantic relationship. Moving on to Uncanny X-Men 198, which is Life Death 2. This means the return of Barry Windsor Smith, who was the artist for the original Life Death issue. And I'll be honest, this was not what I expected from this book. It has Storm coming to terms with who she was and who she now is, while helping a pregnant lady cross Africa back to her village. Well, in this village, Storm learns a very valuable lesson of life and acceptance. I will fully admit here that I expected Storm to get her powers back by the end of this issue, probably thanks to X-Men 97, so I was kind of surprised when that didn't happen, but that said, this issue was still really, really good. Uncanny X-Men 199 returns us to our regularly scheduled Romita Jr. artistry, with Rachel doing some soul searching and officially becoming the new Phoenix. Also, Magneto gets arrested by the Brotherhood, who are now going by the name Freedom Force and are working for the American government. Interesting thing of note, Spiral is now on the team, which is strange because I thought she went through a portal at the end of Longshot. I'm honestly not complaining though, she has such a great design, so I get why they want to use her more, so I approve. This issue also continues the trend of humanizing Magneto more and more, which I really enjoy, and it's obviously leading to issue 200, which is the trial of Magneto. However, before we get to issue 200, let's switch gears to New Mutants. Obviously, it's still being written by Claremont, but the run switches artist from Bill Sienkiewicz to Steve Leiloha after issue 31. Speaking of New Mutants 31, it has Kitty, Rachel, Dazzler, and the New Mutants fighting their way through all the gladiators to their leader, which turns out to be their former teammate, Karma. This was such an unexpected twist for me, and I did not see it coming. It was awesome. It's been like 25 issues since we last saw Karma. I knew she was returning thanks to the issues from last week, but this is not how I expected her to come back. The ending does, however, lead directly into the next arc, which I'm dubbing the Shadow King arc. All the New Mutants regroup and head to Madripoor to save their former teammate, but it goes wrong almost instantly, with Karma possessing almost all of them, leading to Illyana and Danny once again on their own to save the team. After some time shenanigans thanks to Illyana's portals, the pair eventually meet back up with Warlock, who can't be possessed by Karma and has found Storm. The quartet try and free their teammates from Karma's grasp, but instead Illyana willingly gives up Danny and Storm to Karma. Now, this does seem like an insane play in the moment, but Illyana does have a plan, and after some reconnaissance, Magic and Warlock learn that their foe is actually Amal Farouk, aka the Shadow King, a mutant telepath that Charles fought way in his past, way back in X-Men 117, and has been possessing Karma ever since her disappearance. Warlock pretends to be Illyana and confronts the Shadow King, while the real one secretly grabs all of the teammates one by one and brings them to Limbo, which breaks the telepathic hold before releasing all of them all at once against the Shadow King. However, he once again escapes into the astral plane and leaves Karma to deal with the consequences of what he did to her body. This was a really good arc. I really loved it. Maybe not as much as Demon Bear. That's still like the best arc so far, but this one was great, and I definitely liked it more than the Gladiators one. But that could just be because of how broken up the Gladiators one ended up being in this series. I'm glad Karma is back on the team, and I love all the little reactions and character moments we get here. Warlock especially. He's just a weird goober, and I love him so much. I'm also not going to complain about more Danny and Ileana. It's always welcome for me. Ileana's already one of my favorite X-Men, and Danny is very rapidly going up that list and is one of my favorite characters in this book so far. We now move on to the New Mutants Special Edition, where the team takes a vacation after the whole Shadow King ordeal, before them and Aurora get transported to Asgard by Loki and the Enchantress. However, when they try to escape, thanks to Ileana's portals, instead they all get scattered across the 9 realms. Sam finds some dwarves, Amara gets turned into a fairy, Karma gets stranded in a desert, Roberto as well in Asgard, admittedly, Danny becomes a Valkyrie, Rain discovers she's a furry, Warlock meets Hela, and Doug becomes a Viking servant. Oh, and Ileana gets her Darkchild form ripped out of her, which is then forced to hunt down the others under the orders of the Enchantress. The team slowly starts to regroup back together and are a bit too resourceful to fall for the Enchantress's ploy, so they make a ploy of their own and free Ileana and trap the Enchantress in limbo, before contacting the X-Men to help them get Storm back. This leads directly into X-Men Annual number 9, and after getting the communication from Ileana via Nightmare, the X-Men go to Asgard to help the New Mutants rescue Storm, like they've requested. Storm becomes the Goddess of Thunder for a moment, almost kills Wolverine, fights off Hela, and tries to fight Loki, but that doesn't work, so the gang, with the help of the Valkyries, decide to blackmail him instead. This was a super fun crossover. I mean, these two teams coming together is always a fun time, so I'm not super surprised there. I loved all the little adventures that each of the New Mutants had in the special, and the X-Men coming into the fray with the annual was fun, even if they didn't do all that much. Before moving on, I do want to shout out Arthur Adams' art in these two books. It's really good, and it's one of the first instances of the 80s comic art style kind of peeking through the 80s one. It's really cool to see all the art styles kind of change and evolve through the times. However, with this kind of crossover done, this brings us to Uncanny X-Men 200, which, like I said, is the trial of Magneto, where Magneto goes on trial for crimes against humanity, and the X-Men must stop a group of terrorists from killing him. In the end, a dying Chuck makes Magneto the headmaster of his institute before getting whisked away by the Starjammers. The Starjammers do save his life, that's their whole thing in this issue, is taking him and saving his life, but he gets stuck in space with them and his bird wife, for the foreseeable future at least. I kind of feel like I'm glossing over a lot of stuff with this issue, because it is a double-sized issue, and a great one at that, but I just don't know what to say about it. There are a lot of great callbacks to previous issues, and Magneto has a great speech in the courthouse, almost on par with the one from X-Men 97. So yeah, go read this issue. It's real good. I really don't know what else to say about it. The last Uncanny X-Men issue for today is issue 201, where the X-Men return home from Paris to find Madeline has had the baby. However, the Scott's too concerned about Magneto and the X-Men to seemingly care about his wife and being a father. This leads to Storm challenging him to a duel for leadership of the team, which she wins, and Scott realizes he may have fucked up a little. Look, I'm gonna be real here. Cyclops is one of my favorite X-Men characters, but even I have to admit that this is a huge L for Scott. Jackass, go be with your hot wife and newborn son. Why are you debating on what to do? The X-Men have been fine without you for months. I know this is setting up X Factor and Scott's arc there, but man, it's kind of infuriating seeing how wrong Scott is here. However, that aside, there is one more New Mutants issue to cover, which is issue 35, where the main artist changes once again, this time to Mary Wilshire. Magneto introduces himself to the New Mutants as their new headmaster, and the team has conflicting thoughts on him, until, of course, he seeks retribution on a group of college guys for assaulting Danny in the middle of the night. I think this is such a great look at both the team and Magneto's thoughts on this matter. With all of these issues now covered, you can see just how much I enjoyed them based on the rankings here. A lot of 8s, even some 9s in here. The New Mutants Special Edition is the only completed series from this, and it got a 9, putting it in second place right above X-Men God Loves, Man Kills, which admittedly feels a bit weird, but I can't argue with the numbers. It is what it is. With New Mutants and Uncanny X-Men done, this brings us to Dazzler for the final time, with issues 41 and 42, both by Archie Goodwin and Paul Chadwick. We finally meet the masterminds of this last arc, a scientist couple going by the names of Dust and Silence. They made an experimental drug that is designed to give people powers, But, surprise, surprise, it doesn't work right and they can't stop it from killing people. They, however, do find out that the drug has this interesting side effect of being passed down genetically. They also find out that Daz's light can activate those dormant genetics and unlock said superpowers in the children, as well as keep Dust and Silence themselves from dying of the drug they took too much of. Dust's power is taking over other people's bodies. However, when he does this, the body he's in begins to rapidly decay. One of his final victims is Allison's father, the Dazzler himself, as a way of blackmailing Allison into doing what he wants. Allie is too smart, however, and figures out this isn't her dad, and fights him and his little crony, to not great success considering her powers activate other powers. She is saved by Mr. OZ Chase, but this doesn't stop Allison, though, as she learns that her mother was also captured and goes to rescue her. What seems like weeks later, OZ Chase has teamed up with Beast to try and find Allison, who's been missing. Apparently, Allison's confrontation with Silence didn't go too well, which isn't surprising considering Silence is a direct counter to Allie's powers, as she can just create pure silence for any singular person or group of people. This led to Allison getting captured and blackmailed into being used as Silence and Dust intended, a power source to unlock superpowers for these kids and remove the side effects of the drug that was made. Dazzler eventually rebels and saves her mother, defeating Silence by using her powers to create sound instead of light. I have to imagine this is the only time she does this, but maybe I'm wrong there. I don't know. I can't see the future. Her death is then faked by a guy who can make people see things that didn't actually happen, and Allison finally gets the chance to stay out of the limelight. This was honestly a pretty great ending, considering how mediocre this book as a whole was. I'm surprised how much I like Silence as a villain, specifically for Dazzler, and it kind of highlights one of my main issues with the series as a whole, which is the villains, or lack thereof, interesting or original ones. Allison has had very few original villains throughout her series, and almost always they're written out or killed off. Most of the time, she ended up fighting pre-existing villains, and she didn't really have any connection to them, with stuff like Claw and Doom and the Absorbing Man. They were just kind of there. Rogue and Enchantress at least had some sort of vendetta against Allison that made their appearances a bit more interesting, but I just wish she had more lasting villains of her own. Now, if I'm airing out grievances I have with this book, I should mention something that I am positive I've mentioned before, which is that I think Dazzler moving to LA was a mistake. I'm sure it was supposed to be some sort of refresh for the comic, but all it did was just remove her established supporting cast, including her mutant stepsister, whose plotline was never fully resolved. I just remembered the mutant hunters that never came back while I was writing this. And on top of that, they never really introduced anyone new to fill those spots, and then just end up resorting to the same can't find a job plots that they already had while she was in New York, but now they're even less interesting. This book had its moments, shout out to the Darkler and the Galactus arc, that shit was wild, but I just think it took some missteps, especially in the latter half. All that said, it is weirdly bittersweet finishing this book, since it is the first ongoing that I've finished to completion. I mean, I guess technically isn't the first. I have finished both X-Men and Champions, but X-Men didn't really end, it just got rebranded to Uncanny X-Men. Also, I didn't read a chunk of those because they were reprints. And Champions doesn't count because it's not really an X-Men book, and also it's bad. At least Dazzler was pretty consistently above a 5 for most of its run. Speaking of scores, these last two issues of Dazzler get a 7 and 8 respectively, the best scores of the entire run. And the series as a whole ends with a 6.1, which is honestly a very fair score for this book. I'm sure we'll see Allison Blair down the road, but until then, it is farewell to the Dazzler. And that's also farewell for this video. If you've gotten all the way through this, I really, really appreciate it. Please hit any of the buttons below. If you have any thoughts or questions, please leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. The entire playlist is in the description below, and subscribe to stay tuned for the next one, where we return to the life and times of the Scarlet Witch and Vision. See you then. 20 minutes? Jesus.